Hello. Okay, this should be a pretty straightforward edition. I don't know what happened. The first headwear video I did got a lot of views, and then the next one nobody cared at all. But that was more focused on office casual. This is more focused on outdoorsy kind of stuff. Excuse me. So the no real revelations here overall. Pretty straightforward. Wide brimmed hats for the most part. I did talk about in two videos. I forget which one. One of them I talked about how I preferred, slightly different looking baseball hats to regular baseball hats. And so, sorry, my sinuses are acting up as soon as I start filming. So, slightly different than a regular baseball hat. So this has, more of an outdoorsy appeal maybe. And then a few years ago, a couple companies like Orvis did this one where it's kind of a lightweight, see-through mesh kind of tech vibe instead, meant to wick your sweat and all that kind of thing, and a Velcro closure, but still basically a baseball hat, and you can stuff it, but you in a pocket, but you can't really do much with this brim. So at the same time, Cabela's came out with like this brim where you could fold it and put it in your back pocket, but still basically a baseball hat. But the idea being, when you get into town, or whatever, from being out fishing on your boat, you can just stick it in your pocket. But of course, by then your hair probably looks horrible after being under a hat, sweating in the salt marshes or wherever all day. And of course, always something like this, which is not ideal. Usually, I guess you're supposed to, be able to trim this kind of thing. And excuse me again. Often I find that, something like this, even on a regular baseball hat, a lot of times I have to kind of stitch it down in a place and hope that, it doesn't adjust or affect the fit too much as my hair grows in or out. So left or right. The upgrade from that, then, before we get into, the more classy stuff, and then the next, obviously the Boonie hat. Here we have a military style version, although this is not a true military issue one. Shorter brim, and a civilian issue one from, I thought this was Dorfman Pacific, but it's Panama Jack. Okay. Same idea though. Here you've got some, kind of pre-made distressing with the mesh grommets, what's meant to look, harkening back to the bandolier or whatever, bandolier of the, kids used to say, oh, you put your shotgun shells in that, but it's actually, supposed to be for camouflage. And of course, there's versions that don't have that, which we can see plenty in a minute. I'm not going to do a whole retrospective on military history and camouflage patterns, but I do find it hard to find some Boonie hats. Again, if I didn't show around the brim, they also beat up the brim. A guy was commenting about this on a video just the other day, I think when I was talking about the leather jackets. But of course, famously, these are called, jungle hat type 2 in the label. I'm not sure if jungle hat type 1 would be the standard ball cap or if that's the pith helmet. I'm not really sure, but the infantry ones tend to come in sizes instead of small, medium, large. So that's your one slight distinction, but how accurate these sizes are can vary, and they always say, oh, size it up a bit for continued comfort, but of course that can vary too, because sometimes it stays too loose and it just flops around the whole time. Later they added these kind of map pocket things on the interior. I don't know what that's necessarily supposed to do, because usually if I'm sweating, it's through here, which means that the sweat's going to go into here, which means if I'm putting paper in here, it's going to get ruined unless that paper is wrapped in plastic, in which case I'm probably going to sweat more. But of course, they Military ones, unlike typically civilian ones, will have a chin strap with this leather doohickey, which mostly doesn't do as much as you want it to. I usually knot it somewhere once I get it where I want it to be. Or a lot of times just wear it up inside, and if it's not windy, I don't need to worry about it. But when it is windy, I haven't lost a hat yet, I guess, to the wind, I should say. But excuse me again. The strap is. I mean, it's just a little strap. I've seen, a picture of a guy, riding on the landing gears of the helicopter, and his hat doesn't blow off somehow. So okay, there you go. But a lot of times with the wider brims, which I'll show in a second, typically once the wind catches them, they tend to fold up and they're not really blocking the wind anymore anyway. So it kind of like But as opposed to a stiffer brim hat where the wind really wants to take it, so at least in this, the sun is still burning you, but your hat is still on your head. And then of course there's the models that'll have a pin here or a snap, so you can pin up one side, or sometimes it'll have two sides. I don't necessarily know. I mean, I guess if you're wearing headphones, because you're flying or you're shooting or something, then maybe that's useful to you. But it's based on the Australian Army style, of course, or the British, where they would put up the side. I don't know. Sometimes for the walkie-talkie, sometimes for the grenade, sometimes for the rifle. I don't know. We're talking more about just general hiking and camping right now, so not really concerned with military applications. But of course, that brim being slightly thinner than a slightly wider brim, and then of course this fabric being the ripstop, the lighter weight cotton, which I don't even know if you can find the cotton ones anymore. They started making them all nylon and polyester blend. I don't even know if you can find this style of hat very easily anymore, because I haven't needed to go hat shopping in a while, because I have a bunch. But it seems like a lot of the more useful things are getting phased out, so collect them while you can, right? But again, here, this is more similar to the 80s style than the 60s style. I don't have any of the World War II kind of style ones. So, again, the metal grommets instead of the little rivets, and the heavier twill, although this is probably a polyester twill. And, but what I wanted to show off here, the big difference, where'd Mr. Orange go? Typically, some of the wider brim military ones, I think, will have cardboard in the brim so that they'll retain more of their shape and block more sun. So that's part of the reason why I tend to have to buy this style, even though I don't always want to wear, camouflage hats with every outfit I have. And of course, why the short brim ones went out of popularity when the wide brim ones came in, and then somewhere in the 2000s, the short brim ones started coming back in style, and all the Army guys were being issued or buying, however that worked, pretty short brim, which does nothing, in my opinion, at all. The British take on it, of course, is a wider brim, and like I said in the last video, I'm not an expert on British military headwear, but I do have this one. Which was a real elasticized strap with this clip thing, which may not be a nuisance. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about rivets instead of grommets. And it still has some camouflage webbing, but this is a heavy twill. And the big difference here is instead of the map flap, we have the neck flap, which is attached with a bit of Velcro, and there was a lot of civilian versions of this kind of thing. And so you could remove this as you wanted, but then you'd still have this thing kind of hanging down. So how many of their guys would just chop this off entirely? I don't know, but probably plenty. Because, well, obviously in functionality, a lot of guys would take a bandana and pin it or sew it into the back of a regular Boonie hat to block the sun on the neck. And a bandana is nice and lightweight, so it's not too bad, but the sun can still kind of burn you through that. So here we've got a much heavier version, but I've found here in this state of California that it's usually too hot for this twill and this flap, and it just traps way too much heat for me. And so I'd rather tie a bandana than deal with the flap. Yeah. And then it has these tabs that hang down to hold the strap that the American ones don't have all this extra straps and stuff. So kind of literally foreign to me. I didn't grow up with this particular style of hat, but I figured I'd just show it. Whereas what I was talking about a second ago, the civilian version of the the American Boonie hat, the Dorfman Pacific here, we still have this clunky thing that may or may not be useful. And here we have rivets instead of thing. And for some reason, it still has foliage loops. I don't know why. But where we have literally no stiffness to the brim whatsoever. So we get this just total flop effect. And this, though being very similar to the World War II issue ones, I used to be able to find them at the surplus store, but they were always in really tiny sizes. Like even as a kid, I was like, oh, who's gonna wear this hat? And they would show the nurses on MASH. And then this is just a short brim version of the exact same thing by the exact same company. But they would show the nurses on MASH wearing this kind of hat. And whether or not that's accurate to the Korean War, I'm sure it is, because I think they pretty much recycled all uniform stuff for the Korean War. So then here's a German version, on the other hand, which is very stiff, and this is what I'm talking about with the snaps on the side. So you can, but of course they're never placed where they're supposed to go. But you can snap up your side, tally-ho, and no real form at the top. So sometimes it sags in and sometimes it puffs out. And it's not quite a true Boonie hat because it's very stiff all the way through and very stiff brim. But I do like this one, and it does have like kind of a lining for your sweat. I do like this model for the fall. And it has a very robust string tie with a doohickey. But yeah, this is another hat that's typically too warm for summer for me. So they can call it a jungle hat all they want, but I think I would rather have this if I was, but again, here a twill instead of a ripstop. So a little bit heavier weight fabric. So obviously these are mostly unstructured hats, and that's pretty common what you're going to find. And so moving into structured hats, let's start with some less attractive models. This one, there was a nicer version of it, and then they redid it with less stitching through the brim. But Cabela's called this the mesh breezer hat, and the idea was that the wind would go through here, so you didn't lose your hat, and it had this extra string behind the head along with the string in front of the head. This is actually pretty effective, this system. So usually when I get a hat that doesn't have a string, or you can add a string or whatever, I try to approximate something like this method so that I can pull it tight fore and aft, as they say. And here we have more of a real sweatband. Let's see. And plenty of actual sweat stains, but a lot less stitching. So the brim really did not hold any attractive shape at all. I mean, this looks like, the minor 49er coming into town with his pocket full of gold dust. It doesn't have any, the brim is supposed to be adjustable with the wire in it, but that, never actually happened. The only thing that ever happens is the wire bends worse in places where you don't want it to bend. And of course, it used to be a much more dark green, but no, it's like lots of sweat stains, and I've used this hat plenty. It's nylon instead of cotton, so not supposed to rot in the humid environments, but I don't live in a humid environment. The wind, however, instead of always just going through here, a lot of times it will lift the hat from underneath the crown and try and pull it off. So, and of course, you still have the brim can just blow up to the sides from the wind and not cover your face as much as you want. But no hat's perfect, right? But this one was only like 12 or $13, so it was comparable to a Boonie hat price if memory serves. It might have been more, but I probably got it at a sale price. So yeah, if you see a similar one for $70, you can decide whether or not that's worth it to you. Similarly, I have this cheap thing that I talk about all sweated through. But here, for some reason, where they put military grommets in the mesh, in case I needed that ventilation there. And as I said, I've tried to situate. It didn't come with a string at the time, but I put a string in it and did the same kind of configuration. This is just a thick shoelace that came off a rucksack or something. I'm not really sure. But so yeah, it's just but with a stiffer brim and obviously way less material. It's probably polyester blend. It's not nylon, I'm sure. Actually, it says 100% cotton, but I'm sure that means only this fabric. So this fabric is cotton. Correct. So similarly to that, let's go to these. Same exact thing, slightly different brand. This one though never fit me quite as well because it has more of a round crown and doesn't quite have the same teardrop shape. What's this? Henschell. And I think this one was like $30 at the time. I don't know what they are now. But it looks cool. It's got a leather strap instead of a fabric one, but not enough holes here to do that other configuration. So I'd have to punch my own holes. It just has these little grommets or whatever you call it. But basically just another mesh fedora. And yet another mesh fedora. Now this one though, this was the Outback that I got from Cabela's. Now here you see it does have two spots for your strap so you can do the back thing. It has a little map flap where you can fit nothing. And this though was the updated version and the brim very stiff. And the previous one that I have that I'll show up in a minute, doohickey, was actually kind of a nice attempt at a hat. This one was kind of a cheaper version that I didn't like as much. And again, the round crown that doesn't fit me very well, which is why it looks so new after however many 8-10 years, whatever it's been sitting on. But see, this version, this is just the string tied in the front. Same exact company, basically the same model, but this was supposed to be a waterproof one and it wasn't. So I wore it and the water went right through the crown and straight into the head. But I liked the feel of the everything more than that cheap kind of look and feel to it. It has the snap doohickeys for no apparent reason. The grommets here actually, useful because it's not just mesh. But no gimmicks on the inside, just a hat, just regular sweatband and a regular crown, and that's it. And pretty no frills, but a heavy duty. Again, I think if you went with some waterproofing cream, you could maybe make this one waterproof, but I don't know how long that would last along the seam where the water can still get in. But the fact that it was advertised as waterproof oilskin and then wasn't was obviously like that was the whole point that I bought the hat at the time, was because I thought I would get a decent rain hat and ended up with a brown hat. But then again, like I said, then when they reissued them, they went to that cheaper version. So I never bought a second one to compare, because instead I found this version, same company, Outback, with your little doohickey. I don't know what you're supposed to be able to fit in here, a key. But here, the waterproof version, much more deluxe, and for not that much more money at the time. No mesh here, but still ventilation. But this is a very warm hat now. This one you'll sweat in a lot. And the sizing on these was never quite correct. I bought the mediums first and they were way too big. So I sent them back and got the smalls, and they're tight and not as comfortable, and I can't wear it with a bandana. But it does have more of a true sweat band. And this is the Kodiak Quick Dry, and it is supposedly waterproofed on the outside, although it's probably pretty dried out now, and it's never rained enough here really for me when I'm hiking to need it. Anyway, and I have other water hats that I can use. So this one can just look like a cool fedora most of the time when I get around to wearing it. But yeah, same doohickey in the back, same on the string rather, and same double string hole option, although it's hidden in the sweatband here instead of through the crown. So overall, not terrible, but not perfect. I'll probably do another video dealing more with that kind of thing down the line. Similar to there, I don't know what. This is just some no-name brand that I figure I might as well show. I probably showed it in the previous video. Just a shorter brim fedora version, just a canvas this time, no waterproofing, no gimmicks, no straps, just a regular, not quite the old style fishing hat, although similar. I don't have any of the true fishing hats. Again, with the more pinch crown, definitely fits my head better than the more round ones. So you can see where we have more of an oval than a circle, which is why I don't, part of the reason why I don't own any true campaign hats, you know, the Smoky Bear, Boy Scout, Sheriff Department, State Trooper. Enough people already mistake me for a ranger on the trail anyway that I don't need that. but I've been meaning to get one just because I feel like I should have one and don't. So this video is going a little longer than I thought it would, but that's okay. We're down to the last hat for now anyway. And which of course is just the Duluth version of the mesh hat. Again, a very technically unattractive hat. They've put this kind of, oops, sorry for the delay, folks. What I was saying was they put this kind of jazzy stuff here on the top of the brim, and then the bottom of the brim is just more stitching like every other hat I've already shown. One single hole, one single string. I call this the Gandalf hat. I mean, because if this was a tall, pointy crown instead of the mesh, that's basically what you have. It's the widest brim out of most of the ones I found that are functional. I haven't been able to locate. I've seen some places where I can find other Aussie hats, but they're kind of expensive. But the true Aussie hats, the like 5 or 7 inch brim ones that they wore in like Burma, I'm not sure where or when I can ever locate one of those. Although usually when the temperature goes above 70, I don't want felt anyway, which is why I have all these things instead. But I really, really, really would like for my collection, another authentic piece of military history, I guess, more than a hat that I would ever probably wear. But along with, like Smokey the Bear wears dungarees with his campaign hat, Yeah, hence the term Smokies coming for the state troopers, like we were talking about a second ago. Totally unrelated to Australian military. But again, here the brim mostly stiff, but shapeless. There's no cowboy flex or anything to this, and it's not as terribly floppy as like I was complaining about the other one where it sags down too much to block the sun. But again, the wind can grab it, and you don't have the string going behind your head to hold it. But overall, if it's not too windy and you want the breezy thing, these are decent for what they are. If they offer them again this year, I don't know. It has a sweatband again instead of just a fabric. Well, it's fabric sweatband, but it's supposed to be moisture wicking or whatever, I'm sure. This one I think I wore like once, but I have another one that I wore plenty in the photo of the thumbnail, so this one might be a newer one, but I've definitely put these to good use. And yeah, it ran pretty true to size. 100% polyester, made in China, 100% cotton. So that's it. So what this is overlaid on the cotton, I assume, is plastic. And so why they don't have to list that, I don't know. Just says dry clean only with, oh, spot clean only, sorry, with damp cloth. And I've never, ever spot cleaned one. I just hose them off and go on about my day. So I guess that'll probably wrap it up for hiking hats for now, unless anybody has any